Hey there, everybody. It is Sunday. It is actually, daylight savings time.
Daylight savings, yeah. We're ahead of the game.
We're ahead of the game an extra hour. This is Hamza.
This is David.
And we are doing, for this podcast, Understanding Mindfulness. It's a meditation podcast from a homie's perspective.
Meditate on it.
Meditate on it, yeah. So why are we doing meditation and why are we doing it from a homie's perspective? What's your take on that?
Well, because we're two homies that meditate, that love to meditate. So we're going to give you a perspective and what meditation is and our experiences with meditation.
Okay. And all right. So first of all, for those that don't know, what is your definition of meditation?
Well, good question. I mean, you can probably go around, ask 100 different people and probably get 100 different answers, but I'll give you mine. It's an internal practice or exercise, spiritual exercise of quieting the mind, as people like to say. And it's good for relaxation, dealing with anxiety, and tuning in to self and to source. So that's just kind of a general, I mean, it can go off into tons of different directions, but for me, that's kind of what it is.
Okay. And for me, I look at meditation, I always remember this at a Buddhist temple, and a lot of people at the time are asking questions of what's the difference between prayer and meditation? And so their answer at the time was prayer is actually when you're speaking to God, and meditation is when you are actually listening. And so if you have two ears and one mouth, you should spend more time listening, and then you could probably get more of a perspective and a different viewpoint as opposed to voicing your opinions, because you're going to, I found through meditation that I can discover and uncover a lot of things that in my monkey mind I cannot uncover. It's when I actually take a step back. And I know listening to Abraham over all these years, listening to Seth and listening to Bashar, any of those folks, they're doing some level of meditation. And I think uniformly they have all mentioned that they had to go into some type of retreat and letting go through some form of meditation to actually access, even in channeling. So we're not going to talk about channeling from a whole perspective in this podcast, but it is some form of meditation, and it is some form of actually listening. You're communicating what you're hearing to the masses.
Yes. So can you remember the first time that you ever had any experience with meditating?
Absolutely.
Not even before, if it was a class, maybe when you were a child you saw something on TV or anything.
Yeah, and so since this is a homie's perspective, I got to give a shout out to hip-hop, because hip-hop, well, I wish I could remember this barber's name. It was this barber in Orlando. I used to live in Orlando, and I was in high school, and then I had hair, those were good times. And then it's hard to imagine, I had a high top fade, so, it was almost could hit the ceiling, so it's really interesting. But,
like the Kid and Play time?
I totally had the Kid and Play.
Man, I want to see a picture of that.
Oh, I totally have them. It was really funny because I won a homecoming one year, or senior year, right? And the crown went right over. It was like a box cake. It was really funny. Yeah. So I'll get that out to the audience in the future. So anyway, at barbershop, there's a lot of guy talk. We talk sports and this and that. And so one thing that we also did was this barber that I'm thinking about, he was really, he was very religious, right? And so, a song would come on like an R. Kelly or something really nasty, perceived as lower energy, as we would say in 2017. But he would always flip the song, no matter what it was, and made it like a Christian song, right? And it was funny at the time. Everybody used to make fun of him. But in 2017, I look at it as perspective. Life is always perspective. And your initial question was, when did you start thinking about it? And I have to think of hip hop. So when I look at hip hop, I have to think of Eric and Parrish making dollars, more professionally known as EPMD. and I would think of Jungle Brothers.
Is that what EPMD stands for?
Yes, or one of the reasons. Yeah, one of them. That's the main reason.
That's the main reason. Okay.
Yeah, and so their song, if you think about it now in 2017, even though they didn't mean it, it's really, which is another part of the conversation, but their song, "You've Got to Chill," right? I think it applies to this podcast because the way the first words from this song goes, "Relax your mind, let your conscience be free. Get down to the sound of EPMD," right? And so you're like, wow, if you ever listen to any guided meditation, you have to relax your mind, let your conscience be free, right? So homie's perspective, right? Because we go to a lot of events, people don't look like us, or right, and we're not represented on the level that I think more people would or should be.
Yeah.
And so from a homie's perspective, I'm pulling back just like that barber did at the time. So even if EPMD didn't mean it at the time, I still think it would apply. And the second song is the Jungle Brothers, and that song, they're known for "I'll House You" and a lot of really cool hip-hop songs back in the golden era, 88 to 96. And they had a song called "Behind the Bush." And they said, it's more of attracting a female and stuff. I mean, they were teenagers like we were. But they were like, feel the breeze, put your mind at ease, see the pretty birds and the chimpanzees, right? So you're visualizing this. And as I was preparing for this podcast, I was just thinking back of the earlier times that I can think of getting into a meditative state. So those are the two that come to mind right now. How about yourself?
And you were like a teenager at the time?
Yes.
Okay. For me, my first experience, I would say, was about probably 10 years old, and I've been a lifelong fan of martial arts. So this would be like 1974. I was taking Kung Fu. Bruce Lee was popular at the time. Hey, we all wanted to be like Bruce Lee.
Yes.
And my teacher, I took Kung Fu for about a year, and I can't remember if it was at the beginning of class or at the end or even how often we did it, but at some point in time during class, he'd have us sit down, kind of lotus position style, legs crossed, and do the typical forefinger, thumb touching type thing, put it on our knees, close our eyes, and he would just kind of guide us, talk to us, and kind of guide us through something. From what I can recall, it was very relaxing, kind of cool. So that was my first time doing anything meditative. I was about 10 years old. That's
a really good point. And I actually want to stay there. I have to shout out to my mom, my parents. I have to shout out to every parent that had a kid that grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, because I think we all have that experience of taking a karate class, a judo class, and a lot of it was brought on by the major media at the time, like you mentioned with Kung Fu. Excuse me. And yesterday I was watching this YouTube channel, Nardwar, and he's awesome. If you guys don't know it, you guys definitely need to check him out. And he was interviewing Wu-Tang Clan, and Wu-Tang was talking about they're going back to their childhood and watching all these Kung Fu movies.
Wow.
And if you're watching a lot of it had a really good influence on us. Obviously, Wu-Tang, pretty much their whole moniker coming out was based off of the martial arts. And while, as little kids we're fighting each other during commercials and stuff and having fun, as adults we really started to buy into and look into Eastern cultures and how it could influence our lives. So again, I have to thank my mom personally, because even having this conversation just made me think of how she allowed me to explore everything as a child, and even today. So, and I know a lot of my counterparts didn't have that type of fluidity with their parents. They're coming into it now, where they felt like they had to break through some type of acceptance from their parents. And I think my mom and my parents, my grandparents, were always open to us exploring all the different religions, anything to give us a greater worldview than what we were seeing just around our neighborhood.
Experiencing, in your own neighborhood community. So, do you remember the television show Kung Fu?
I do.
God, man, I just love that show. And I know originally that role was written for Bruce Lee, and one of the reasons that they didn't use him was because of, he had somewhat of an accent, didn't speak straight, clear English, and so they just thought that might be kind of, a hindrance, I guess, for the show. So they sought, David Carradine was the one that ended up doing the character. But yeah, that show and just Bruce Lee in general was a huge influence for me at that time. Really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think Bruce Lee is one, but I think Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the other.
Yeah.
Right? And so when they fought, and Chuck Norris,
yeah,
those three, and I think, Bruce Lee kind of opened the door for us to seeing those guys because we saw them in his movies.
Yeah.
And, every child was in. I know we're probably having a conversation about martial arts and all, but I think the underlying theme was the meditation, because even in the movies, Bruce Lee did meditate.
Yeah.
In a lot of the Run Run Shaw movies that I really loved, the Kid with the Golden Arm and those type movies, they were always fighting at a Buddhist temple. In addition to practicing, they also set aside time for meditation.
Yeah.
So, these little droplets or God winks, as we did last week, were, if you think about it or even listen to this podcast, I'm sure you'll even come up to different ideas as see how far you can go back to just the subject matter of meditation.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Let me ask you this. So you told me about what kind of started as your teen years. As an adult, when did you start meditating, or what was your experiences as an adult? How did that come about?
Well, again, I think I really have to go back as a child again, because when I mentioned the Abraham and Jane Roberts and all them meditating so they can actually listen to the channel coming through, and what the channels always say is that you should take time to meditate or take a nap, which is our first podcast. So I think these kind of go together, and if you haven't heard the first, you should go back and listen to the first podcast where we're talking about napping. So I would combine the two. As a child, we looked at taking a nap as a punishment, right? Like, I don't want to take a nap, and we would always stomp up the stairs, and the parents would always say, you better stop, I'll give you some noise, I'll give you something to stomp about and all. But looking back as an adult, I was refreshed, I had a different perspective, and I could go back outside and play, whereas I was really angry before going to sleep. And so even as an adult, I found that, and I said that in the first podcast, where I actually had to either sleep on it or take time to meditate to overcome or handle a situation that I was going through at the time, that in my monkey mind, I really was getting in my own way. And I found that over and over again. I found that in college. You have a lot of free time in college, so I did make time to meditate. Here in Atlanta, we have a lot of Buddhist temples. We have a lot of churches. It is south of Bible Belt, so I always used those resources to reach out to as well. And the community is really, really supportive, and especially in college, because that is, for the most part, most people are away from home for the first time. They're in another state or another country, and they're just looking to identify themselves or get their own identity. And the Buddhist community, the meditative community, the African arts community, the so-called conscious community today, all of those were resources, and they still are resources that we have in Atlanta that I've noticed in traveling around the country that other cities do not have it, and I know that we take that for granted. And I know with you being from the San Fran area that you guys pretty much had the same deal.
Yeah. So did you have a particular style of meditation that you practiced?
That's a really good question.
Because there's so many different styles, and some people use a mixture of styles, but for me it's like just whatever works for you, but just out of curiosity.
I think it really depends, because I think the traditional way to meditate, people meditate, is you're sitting in a arms your legs crossed, lotus position, your eyes are closed, and I found some benefit in that. I know in some Buddhist temples here in Atlanta, they have what's called a walking meditation. And so the argument there is that, well, it's great to have your eyes closed when you're meditating in a lotus position. Throughout your waking time, your eyes are open. Yeah. And so when you're doing a walking meditation, your eyes are open throughout the whole meditation process. And so we'd meditate for 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'd have a 35-minute discussion of what we discovered during that time.
So you're walking?
Yes.
Like just walking in circles?
No, you're walking in a square. It's kind of like a room, a regular square room, rectangular room, if you will. There would be about, depending on the day, they have like 15, 20, 30 people in at the time. Okay. You may have one of the lead Buddhist leaders at the temple that they would use it more so as a recruiting tactic at the beginning. It's more of this introduction to Buddhism, and they would do this walking meditation, and then it was really great because it was a refresher when I got into Horizon Center, where you had to actually hold your space for an hour, and it made me really recognize and understand how Joanne would get upset, not get upset, but the students would get upset with Joanne at the time because we come in introductory classes and we're like, how do we hold our space, right, for 5 minutes? And the monkey mind comes in. And then towards the end of class, right, and it was a year-long class, or for us it was 9 months. So, no, it was a year-long class. And so, and during that time, at the end, we're sitting there, like, we could sit there for 2 hours, it was no big deal, but our energy was different from the new people coming in. Exactly. So the new people were kind of taken aback, and they may not come around if we were around. So we were, in essence, kicked out right after graduating or right before graduation, just so you can have that influx of that new energy coming in.
Yeah, the old students kind of start to, it's something, exactly.
Yeah.
Had to kick them out. So for me, I guess as an adult, probably after the whole martial arts thing when I was 10, the next introduction to doing any kind of meditation is probably when I was about 20, I guess, and I took a meditation class. And this was at BPI, and it was about a 6-week long class, once a week for 6 weeks, and very profound. Learned a lot about my energy and just going internal, something that I hadn't really done most of my life at all. Everything's always been external. So that particular type of meditation has to do really with being in the body, whereas a lot of meditation out there has to do with being out of the body. So that's not a better or worse, just a different type. So we really focused on being in the body, doing what is known as running energy through the body, lower part of the body and the upper part of the body. And some of the benefits I got from that was just really deep relaxation, being able to, the ability to look inward, enhance some of your spiritual tools that you have, communicate with Source, listen to Source, work on different aspects of yourself if you want to. It's kind of an endless string of things that you can do once you get to that space of quieting the mind.
Now, you mentioned running energy, so what does that mean for the people that don't know that?
Well, running energy, there's 2 types of energy that you run when you do that type of meditation. One of them is earth energy, where you run the earth energy coming up, bringing it up from the center of the planet, and you run it through the lower part of your body. It's come through the legs, through your feet, through your legs, into your first chakra, and then down to the center of the planet. You just kind of release any energy that's not yours. So that's what we call known as earth energy. And then there's the cosmic energy that you bring out from the cosmos into the top of your crown chakra, down your spine. It goes into your first chakra, mixes with the earth energy, then it turns and comes right back up your spine, the front part of your spine, then out and fountains out the top of your head. And then you have branch off a branch that comes down your arms and out your hands. So all that simultaneously is flowing through you, and it cleans out, kind of cleans all your energy channels, gets you to a place of where you're, cleaned out and quiet your mind, and then at that point you're in a good space to be able to focus on something, anything in particular that you want to have kind of a laser focus on. If you just want to sit there and have that experience of just that energy running and then just enjoy that, you can do that. If you want to start looking at different aspects of your life, things that you want to work on or change, you can do that. You can just go in endless directions with it. So that's, kind of in a nutshell, how it kind of worked for me and what that experience was like.
Now, I think that's a great way to start a meditative habit or a meditation habit, because what you just underlined was you're combining the two. You're combining the earth energy and the cosmic energy. And traditionally, most people, this is a generalization obviously, but you're taught to I can only control what I can see. And if you're looking at meditation, or at least open to it, you have to have some type of belief that there is a power outside of you. And so you start, I think that's the easiest way to meditate for beginners, is to actually go through that exercise of running energy, because you get that practice of grounding your earth energy, and you're grounded, but you're also open to the other resources that are greater than you can actually see with your own two eyes.
Yeah.
And so, I guess the mysticism would be opening your third eye, as people would say.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Plus, that I said what I said, but I've been meditating for 32 years, and it's just been a gradual process. So being able to sit and run energy and quiet your mind, something that doesn't happen overnight. It's kind of like a muscle. The more you exercise that ability and use it, the kind of stronger it gets. So I, for example, when I first started, probably couldn't kind of close my eyes and be kind of focused on that probably for more than 5 minutes. And then after a certain amount of time, it was, I worked up to 10 minutes, and then maybe 20 minutes, into an hour. So nowadays, when I meditate, an hour minimum, I can do that like my sleep. I can just, no problem. But I generally go hour and a half, 2 hours is a good amount of time. And a lot of, some people are like, wow, how can you just, I say, hey, that's not something I can always do. It's something I worked on. Mm-hmm. It's a gradual process. But, to this day, I'm still doing it. Mm-hmm. How often do you meditate, would you say?
Well, okay, so I have something to add based on what you just said before going into your question to me. And so recently in some Abraham talks, Abraham is mentioning that we fought so hard to incarnate, right? And if you think about it biologically, right, you have millions of sperms reaching that one that breaks through, and that becomes us, right? And not, not to go off on that tangent. However, there's a huge push, there's a huge desire, there's a huge amount of energy to incarnate. And so Abraham's like, you don't know how hard you fought to get here. Yeah. And when you get here and you get caught in third dimensions, you're looking for ways to leave, right? And you're looking for ways, or should I be a Buddhist monk, or should I meditate for 10 hours a day, or should I go on a retreat, or should I live in the mountains and just eat tree bark? And she's like, and they're like, no. And you don't necessarily need to spend that time, even though you will get a lot out of it. I think for beginner meditators, right, or people just interested living through other people, they may get turned off thinking, hey, am I going to totally change my lifestyle because I'm doing this, or I have to do it for 2 or 3, 4 or 5 hours at a time, where crazy. One, I don't have enough time, I'm so busy as soon as I wake up until I go to sleep. And I think that the message that I want to convey is that start out small. It only takes 5 minutes. You can build up to that. I think where you're seeing that is you're seeing so much benefit from it, but you don't necessarily need the 2 or 3 hours all the time to get the same amount. Like, you wouldn't feel less of a person if you only had 5 minutes to meditate versus 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's not really the amount of time. If you can meditate for 5 minutes and just get as much out as you would, for an hour, that's just a personal preference I have because I enjoy it so much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that and you haven't seen this yet, so I'm not going to give away the movie, but I want to talk a little bit about Get Out. And so, while it's a horror movie, the other movie that we could spend more time on is Skeleton Key, because I think the movies go together. Okay. In the fact that I think that Jordan Peele got his message across that it was a scary movie and everything that Get Out entails. However, I think, and time will only tell, I think the other message that may be scary to a lot of people is the subject matter of hypnosis. And so when you talk about meditation, there are meditations where you have, like you said, or I said monkey mind, where your mind is just still thinking of your daily chores and things, and you're not really in your body to actually settle down and actually meditate. So there are a lot of helpful resources, both online or things that you can buy to get guided meditations. And I find guided meditation is very helpful, right? Like you said, it could be for anxiety, it could be to stop smoking, and I think a lot of people look at hypnosis as something that's evil. Some people may look at meditation as something that's evil. And I think that there's good and bad in every aspect of whatever you do. I mean, third dimension is all about duality, right? So there's good in hypnosis, there's bad in hypnosis. There's good in meditation, there's bad in meditation, right? And I think that it'll be interesting to see as the future goes on of the reluctance to hypnosis, because as a horror movie, it was seen to take over somebody else's body. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit because, like, I actually have clients that are hypnotists, right? And they have legions of people across the country that they've been able to help, and that could be the start of getting to meditation. And so they may reach a hypnotherapist or a clinical hypnotherapist first just to get some type of structure, and usually they give them a guided meditation so that they can do it on their own that would help with visualization.
Yeah.
So as we were mentioning with maybe the martial arts, the Asian community, or the Asian culture, or in my take, the hip hop, there's so many different avenues that led to meditation, to even the subject.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give the impression that there is, and I know I'm not, but just for sake of mentioning that there are many ways that can lead you to meditation, as long as it's putting you in the right frame of mind to actually enhance and be your best potential, reach your highest potential.
Exactly. Have you ever been hypnotized?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, okay.
Absolutely.
For some reason, now I know not everyone can be hypnotized, right?
Let me qualify that. Let me qualify that. Yes, because here in Atlanta, I have to give a perspective. This is how my mind works. So I have to go far out and come back, right? And so you can see that as you can see my energy before we were doing the podcast.
Yeah, off air. Yeah.
Right. So, but anyway, there's multiple Atlantas in my mind. So let me clarify that. For those, Atlanta's a transplant city. There are a lot of people from other cities and countries, right, that come here. They're not born and raised here. And so there's a saying that there are multiple Atlantas, meaning there was an Atlanta before the Olympics, and there was an Atlanta after the Olympics, and then there was an Atlanta before the crash in 2008, and there was Atlanta after the crash in 2008.
Atlanta BC, Atlanta AD.
Absolutely. So to answer your question, there is open to hypnosis prior to going to Horizon Center for Intuitive Awareness, and after. There was an openness where more like the movie that I didn't know my space, and I think I was more susceptible to hypnosis. And I think that's the fear that a lot of people have is, hey, this person's going to take control of my body. Whereas after Horizon Center of Awareness, I was able to control my space, and I can actually see what was happening before the hypnosis would happen, and choose at that time to allow to go to that next step, to take a step back. And so it's not part of this conversation, but I think it would still go in the same line of channeling, right? A lot of people fear, and it could be a horror movie again, right? Possession. A lot of people look at the lower energy of it. Or even meditation, if you do astral projection of negative energy that's out there, right? But if you have your space and you put up your rose or your white light as we're taught, then you have the protection, and you're still in your seniority where you're not giving all of your power over to someone else.
Oh, okay. So based on what you just said, you're saying before Horizon, you could be easily...
Yeah, I was open to it. I was thinking back to a seminar, and there was Marshall Silvers. Some people may know him, some people may not. He's huge in the personal development space, millionaire mind, you could be a millionaire type of deal. And he's a licensed hypnotist, and he's a stage hypnotist. And so, at some of these conferences you would go and they'd have a whole line of people and people would pass out on stage.
Yeah, I've been having them, do all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah, man. Yeah. You could go on YouTube and watch all this stuff, right?
Videos, yeah.
And I remember one time I could see myself falling, but then I caught myself, right? Like some people just fell out on the stage, and then I caught myself like, I don't want to fall down. This is silly, right? So I got back into my seniority, not knowing or having the wherewithal or the education. So Horizon more so gave me the education of, oh, this is what you were naturally doing.
Yeah.
You were just exercising your seniority. You didn't give it all the way up.
Yeah.
Whereas someone that doesn't know about their boundaries are more susceptible.
Oh, okay.
And so that's where the fear comes in with the movies like The Skeleton Key, which I thought everyone should watch in relation to meditation, in relation to anything, because it's perception again. If you do not believe something, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, because every time I've ever watched any kind of where they're doing hypnosis, like on YouTube, and they have a bunch of people up there, you always get this perception that you cannot control. The guy just walks up and starts, snapping his fingers, this, that, or the other, and they're just completely under his control. And when I watched that, I would say, wow, I have a hard time seeing that happening to me. And so someone once told me, well, not everyone can be hypnotized. Some people. So I've always been curious about that, and I was like, I want to find someone and see if I can just be hypnotized. But based on kind of what you're saying, so you're at a point where you can, if a hypnotist were come into the room and try to hypnotize you, you could, yes, I'm going to let myself be hypnotized, or no, I'm not. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and again, I think it's an awareness. So, to bring some levity to this, I used to argue with women about, women would always say, especially in Atlanta, I don't go to nightclubs. You know the guys you're going to meet at a nightclub, right? They're the scum of the earth type of deal.
Dogs.
And dogs, roof, all that stuff, right? And I would just laugh, right? Like today, I'm past that phase, right?
You're not a dog anymore?
Not that. But what I was saying to them in the argument was, that same guy that you saw at the club on Saturday, maybe the guy sitting next to you at church on Sunday.
Yeah. And
your perception is that in this environment, this is what happens.
Yeah.
So at a nightclub, this is your perception, right? And I'm saying that to say that traditionally the way this conversation is going is, if I'm going to be entertained by a hypnotist at a conference or something like that, it's entertainment. So a lot of people automatically have their perception of, this is entertainment. And so they're also looking at, they may have the dinosaur arms up, and that, hey, I have my guard up because this is what I expect here.
Yeah.
But that opens up a whole nother ball of worms, because there's a lot of subliminal advertising, right, that you're not thinking of, and you see a Coca-Cola commercial. I shouldn't have said a brand name so we don't and we're so small, so I don't even think they'll see this podcast, but there's documentation of the 50s when people were going to movie theaters and they were sitting waiting for the movie to start, and there would be an advertisement of, go get your soda and your popcorn, and all of a sudden you're hungry for it.
Yeah.
And they had to actually take that away. They were hitting what we're talking about, is subliminal messages that exist even today, that's been happening for the past 50, 60 years. And in that environment, your guard is more so down because you're not expecting it, and that, hence the subliminal. And so if I'm in an environment with a hypnotist, as you were asking, my guard is up. If I'm in the movie theater, or if I'm just watching television, and hey, is your elbow itching? Well, you know it is itching. Well, you know you're going to die in 3 weeks because of this, unless you take this drug, and here are the side effects.
Yeah.
So it's all in your perception of your ability to discern that, and then to be open to subliminal messaging. And I think on some level that is meditative, because it's forcing you to relax subconsciously. And then if you're relaxed, then you're open to receiving that message. Those messages wouldn't be, and I'm in marketing and advertising, so I do this all the time. So I totally understand the mindset from both. I always tell my clients that I'm speaking to you as a business owner, because as a business owner, you want to get business from these targeted clients. But these are some ways to do it, and a lot of it is through your method of advertising. So what advertising is more, where are you getting the biggest return out of it, right? Or is it more productive to just put, buy my stuff, where people will put their arms up because it's hypnosis? Or is it something where you make it relatable, and they're more open to it, and now I've tapped into their subconscious where they're making the purchase decision, because the saying is, people love to buy, but they hate to be sold.
Yeah.
And I think meditation on some level falls into that.
Okay. Well, that's interesting you're talking about the whole advertising thing, because, they say on a given day, and anywhere there's 1,500 to 3,000 solicitations for our attention.
Yes.
Okay, so what does that tell you? That tells you that our attention has tremendous value.
Yes.
Okay, so for in relation to meditation, let's say for example you're riding a bike, and what do they say? Always look to where you want to go, not to what you're trying to avoid. So that's kind of a body example, but inwardly it's kind of the same way for meditation, whereas you turn that attention inward, right, and it has great value as far as meditation. You quiet the mind and you start focusing and getting, narrowing it down to what. That's one of our best creative assets is our attention.
Yes.
Right, and we've been taught from very, very young. When you're in school, hey, pay attention. Your parents, hey, pay attention. Mm-hmm. People are always trying to get our attention. So that tells you the value of it. But when you turn that around and go inward, right, let's say you have a fleeting thought of something that's unflattering, right, and then within your mind that catches your attention, well, you're going to externalize and start to manifest things that are in relation to that in your experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I love to piggyback on that right now because of time, because I know we got to cut off shortly, but that is a really good point, and I have to put on my tinfoil hat for a quick second. And so if you think of meditation or hypnosis or advertising to attention, in 2017, I can say 3 numbers, and it would put you in a mind state of a meditation. And all I would have to say is 911.
Yep.
And so for a person, especially in the United States, they automatically go back to that time, and they are in a meditative state because that is where their attention is. And so it was really interesting to go to an I Can Do It conference in Toronto, and who was there? Gregg Braden was there.
Oh, really?
Yes, and he was fantastic because he's a scientist, he's a trained scientist and a mathematician, and they have instruments where they were able to measure the attention of the people across the world when 9/11 happened,
wow.
right? So on the subconscious level, they have instruments that you can actually measure where the attention is, right? And so for me, I actually have an agenda for this one because I'd like to have a call of action to people that are listening to this podcast as it relates to attention, because since the election, there's been a lot of distraction that's happening. Case in point, in 2012, there was the traditional, the United States is divided on who should pick the president, and for this argument, I really could care less who you voted for. But at the time, the country was split in half, right? And so while we were distracted on who we should vote for, the president at the time had signed the Monsanto Act, where it allowed companies to not put genetically modified ingredients on the label of whatever you bought, right? And so because of that distraction, a lot of people were unaware of this. And so because of the attention, people started getting out there on the web and making more people aware of this. So much so in 2017, you can go in stores now and look in the cereal aisle, in my case, and other places, and see that there are some labels on some companies that are being good stewards and saying that the food has been genetically engineered. But with the Monsanto Act, they didn't necessarily have to do so. And that was 2012 up to 2017. So what I'm talking about today is, I know in the past week the big distraction was Ben Carson, and he said some things that we don't have to spend a lot of time on. It was just, how could you imagine what he said? And I don't want to spend any energy on that. But I looked at it as a distraction. And the distraction was, this week Congress has started to repeal GINA. And are you familiar with GINA?
No, I'm not. Okay,
so what I want to talk about was GINA. GINA was instituted in 2008, and what that stands for is Genetic Information Non-Disclosure Act of 2008. And what it meant was any genetic information that you have, employers could not use that, or other companies could not use that information. We're going through a repeal right now that they're going to allow companies in the future to look at your genetic information and make a decision, should they hire you or not, based on that information, should they give you insurance or not, And because the world's or the United States' attention is not on that, we have shown, and we haven't really talked about it in this podcast, but you can meditate by yourself, or in the case with the Buddhist temples that I've been at, or our attenders group, you can actually have meditation in a group
setting, yes.
Group settings, and if you do that on a grand scale, it is so powerful, so impactful, and things get so much done outside of just yourself. So it actually highlights our oneness, our connectedness.
Yes.
Right?
That's a good example of strength in numbers.
There are strength in numbers where it's probably, in my opinion, more powerful than people angry walking up and down with a picket sign because they're upset about something that's been happening, in the past couple of weeks. I think from a meditative standpoint, a meditation, not to discount, right? You should still protest and what have you. I just think if you're looking at the bigger return, if I'm not familiar with grounding and using my energy, I'm totally in third dimension, and this is how we get things done.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, when you're connecting your earth energy with the cosmic energy, and you're doing it collectively, we have insurmountable power that has not been tapped into.
So there was, just real quickly, there was a book written, I think he was a Japanese author, and it was about how putting the attention on water, and they were able to change the structure of it just by having, I think, one person. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay. Just by having one person have their attention on it, and he was able to prove this. And his bigger point was, what if you had thousands of people having their attention on whatever it is?
Yes.
Exactly what you kind of going back to saying,
Absolutely. And I think that, in the grand scheme of things, the lessons learned is, I would use the, the March on Wall Street or Occupy Wall Street, right?
Yeah.
And so lessons learned from that, a lot of people had different agendas of what they wanted to do, and that's fine. And you should, right, because we have free will and what have you. I think it should be something really small, start out small, right, that everyone can agree on, and because we live in a duality, right? Yeah. So there's always going to be opposing views. But if there's something that the whole collective can benefit from, I think it's something that people that listen to this podcast, that can like this podcast, that can spread the podcast, and let them know the power of meditation, because it is huge.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make light of it, because there are some that would look at meditation as woo-woo, and we're doing it from a homie's perspective. So if people that look like us traditionally wouldn't even talk about meditation, I'm showing throughout life, from the martial arts as little kids, from hip-hop and listening to these little messages, you have no idea, even when those people made those songs or those movies came out, they had no idea the impact
it was going to have
that they would have on the regular person.
Yeah.
Right? So if we're getting that message out for the power of meditation and how simple it is, it doesn't mean you have to go out and eat tree bark in Mesopotamia.
Yeah, go climb up to the top of a mountain and get in a cave, and no, not at all. Just, I'd say, be open.
Yeah.
Try it. And just kind of take it from there. There was a time in my life where someone told me, "Oh, you're going to be meditating, for the rest of your life," and I'd be like, "Nah, you're crazy." Well, here I am, 30-something years later, and that's what I've been doing, and it's been beneficial beyond words.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think the lesson learned, or the takeaway, is to just check us out, listen to additional podcasts and such, or listen to the previous podcast. We'll have the website up this week, so you can reach us there. I'm not going to give out the domain yet until it's up. We're actually going to have our podcast go to iTunes this week. And if you want to reach us on our Facebook page or in the comments below, I encourage everyone to do so. And we can grow together, because I think that's what this is. We're showing you that this information is universal. You can get it from a brother's perspective. You can get it from other places, but
homies,
get it from a homie's perspective. It might be the best way in our opinion.
That's right. No, it is the best way.
It is the best way, right? Let me be succinct there, right? So again, I third one in, and I think they're getting easier and easier as time goes on.
It's our third or fourth? Yeah,
it's our third.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were talking beforehand that we'll probably do one more before we start inviting guests.
Yeah, a couple of weeks we'll have a guest.
We have been getting feedback of people that want to be on the show, so we're excited that we're actually getting some legs behind this.
Yes.
And even if we didn't, I think that this is a good way to just exercise and get out what people are thinking about. Not the movie Get Out, but we're getting the information out there on different subject matter. Get out! Support the movie, by the way. I thought it was just something for conversation. But I know on the web it's in one direction where people are more reactionary and they're dealing on the fear aspect. And from a meditation and the hypnosis standpoint, I think they're really missing the point that there's really good benefit that you can get or individuals can get from meditation, and there's good and bad that you can use for each of those. And I think the good far outweigh the negative.
Real quick, did you see Moonlight?
No.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Oh, okay.
I've seen it. I just was curious what you thought about it because it won Best Picture and all that. So.
Oh, no. I haven't even heard of it. So
Moonlight, you haven't heard of it? Okay.
I've never even heard of it.
Okay.
So maybe that's something I should check out, and we'll report back for our podcast next week.
Okay.
Well, we're headed off to our Intenders meeting, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this podcast as much as we had creating it. And I'm Hamza.
I'm David.
And we look forward to speaking with you soon.
Peace out.
Peace.